I call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, March 10th, 2022. This meeting is being held electronically pursuant to Minnesota statute section 13D.021, which allows it in the case of a pandemic and board chair's determination that it is not prudent or feasible to meet in our board meeting room. We can meet electronically. All applicable portions of the open meeting law are being applied, and that includes, in this case, taking votes by roll call. So let us begin first with taking attendance. Manager Hitchmati.
Present.
Manager Olson. Manager Miller.
Here.
Manager Maxwell.
Here.
Manager Loftus.
Here.
Manager Sando.
Here.
Manager Olson. And Manager White is here. I'm certain that Manager Olson will be joining us shortly, which will bring us to 7. But we are at a quorum. Is there anyone, Mr. Whisker, here who wishes to speak to the board, member of the public? I don't see any names.
No, there isn't.
Okay, thank you. The next item of business is to approve the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move approval.
Thank you, Manager Miller. Is there a second?
Sando second.
I'll take Manager Hitchmati's second. Voting then on approving the agenda. Manager Sando.
Here.
Manager Loftus.
Aye.
Manager Maxwell.
Aye.
Manager Miller.
Aye.
Manager Olson.
Aye.
Manager Hitchmati.
Aye.
Manager White votes aye. That is unanimous. Under information items this evening, we have a very wonderful event, which is the swearing in of the Hennepin County Board appointed MCWD board managers. And I'll look to Mr. Smith to do that. Officiate.
Thank you, managers. If you would raise your right hand and repeat after me. We've got Manager Hitchmati.
Hang on a second. Let me get into place where you can see my face on my hand. Okay.
I, Arun Hitchmati,
I, Arun Hitchmati,
solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute.
We back up. That I will support the constitutions of the United States and the state of Minnesota.
I will support the constitutions of the United States and the state of Minnesota.
And faithfully discharge the duties
And faithfully execute the duties
of the office of manager
the office of manager
of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District
of Minnehaha Creek Watershed District
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Very good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And then Manager Maxwell is ready also.
Very good. I, Gene Maxwell, do solemnly swear
Eugene Maxwell, do solemnly swear
that I will support the constitutions
that I will support the constitutions
of the United States and state of Minnesota
of the United States and the state of Minnesota,
and faithfully discharge the duties
and faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of manager
of the office of manager
of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District
of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Always fun. On the consent agenda this evening, I'm there, right? Yes, we have approval of the minutes of the February 24th board meeting, approval of the check registers, just the general checking register tonight for that one check, and 3 resolutions, 22-011, authorization to submit 325 Lake Road Stormwater Project for Public Facilities Authority Point Source Implementation Grant Certification. 22012, the 2022 National American Planning Association Conference attendance. 22013, authorization extending the administrator's authority to enter into contracts for operations. And 22014, approval of the district's updated COVID-19 preparedness plan. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved, Hejmati.
Thank you, Manager
Maxwell.
Hejmati. Is there a
Maxwell,
second? Manager Maxwell. Thank you, Manager Maxwell. Then voting on the consent agenda, Manager Miller,
Aye.
Manager Olson, Manager White. I'm sorry, aye. Manager Sando,
Aye.
Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Hejmati,
Aye.
Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
Manager Olson. I didn't hear your response. Can you say it again?
Aye.
Thank
you hear me?
Yes, consent agenda is adopted. I attended a few meetings since our last meeting here. The CAC had its second onboarding session for new members. Representatives Acom and Long met with Mr. Whisker and I and Joel Carlson. And the Minneapolis liaison briefing update for Manager Hejmati and Miller and I was just earlier this week. Now, at the last board meeting, we conducted a performance review for the district administrator. So this is the official report on that. On February 24, 2022, the Board of Managers conducted a performance review of District Administrator James Whisker. The board evaluated his performance to be excellent and elected to give Mr. Whisker a salary increase of 8.3% effective January 1, 2022. From this discussion, the board also agreed that it is important in the coming year to review all staff compensation to assure that the district salary grid is competitive in the current market. That is the performance review report, but with Mr. Whisker's consent, I'm going to say a few more words about comments the board made during that review that affect the organization in general, our goals and progress. And of course, that would be of interest to staff. I am going to ask managers not to comment because I don't want to risk any violation of the Data Practices Act because, of course, of confidentiality of employment records. So we, let's see here. Some of the things that the board were really pleased about was the recruitment and retention of top quality staff and maintaining high standards and accountability in the organization. The board also approved of the relationships that we have with our communities, counties, and legislature. And while recognizing that not all work during the year moved at the pace that was expected, we were generally pleased with the pace of the output and we continue and be with the fact that we're continuing to internally align during the pandemic and understanding the pandemic challenges. We are proud of the work that staff is doing to remain focused and continue finding ways to support one another across the team. The board also looked to the future, recognizing that we need to continue our efforts to align our programs internally around balanced urban ecology, being excited about the 5-year direction that's going forward with the multi-year CIP and climate action, recognizing that we are at a point where we need to begin scaling up and seeing the need to do that. And then in doing so, developing a staffing plan for the future and continuing to invest in staff, including in compensation to ensure that we remain competitive with the market. We know that we are poised in this coming year to reevaluate the benchmark against the marketplace. I would call that a very satisfactory meeting we had. Manager Loftus, can you give us a report from the Operations and Programs Committee meeting?
Yes, thank you, President White. The Operations Committee met this evening for about 45 minutes, and we had one item on our agenda. It was to discuss a permit application from the City of Edina. And the project is a fairly complex one in the Morningside neighborhood that includes a stormwater project and I guess really flood risk reduction project. Like I mentioned, it's fairly complex. The staff gave us a summary and background on the project, how it fits within the watershed district's regulation, and then also opportunities for collaboration with the city of Edina, Minneapolis, and then also Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. And then obviously with the district as well. This is an issue that will come before the board for the full board's consideration on April 14th. And that was the only topic we discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other meetings or events managers would like to report on? The upcoming meeting and event schedule is in the agenda. We have meetings of our committees and boards on March 24th and April 14th. And additional meetings are the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting on March 16th. Manager Olson is the liaison from the board. And the Metro Mod meeting will be on April 19th. Manager Sando is the liaison there. We are now ready to move to item 13.1, which is a report from Mr. Steele on the permitting platform and strategic outputs of the demonstration.
Thank you, President White. Managers, just to confirm you can hear me and see my screen?
Can.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, I am very happy to be here before you tonight. I will be talking about our new permitting system, Elements XS. We've been working diligently to implement this new system, and as that work is winding down and the implementation process is sunsetting, I wanted to come before the board and show you what we've accomplished, but really more importantly is how this new system will better inform our decision making. So really the goals of this implementation and what we've been able to accomplish were, creating a centralized, standardized data structure and platform to really be the single source, the single hub of all of our permitting data. And with that single hub, we're really using it to capture all the useful data and information that passes through our permitting process. I know our current, or I guess at this point, our old permitting system was quite rigid. Originally was built by an intern many years ago, and really because of that rigidity, it led to data being saved all over the place within the system, in spreadsheets and emails, plan sets, or it just wasn't saved at all. So really, we were aiming and we accomplished building out a system that's really flexible, and it can not only capture the data that we're interested in right now, but it can adapt and change as our needs adjust over time. And really got the hub, all that data there. Really the goal here is being able to, analyze, summarize, and visualize that data, create those really deep insights to our coming out of our permitting data that we can make decisions with. And that's really what it's about at its core, is living into that goal of advancing MCWD as a data-driven organization where all that information is plugged into decision-making at all different levels of the district's work. So tonight I want to be able to just demonstrate how this new permitting data can provide actionable insights at some of those levels that might not be immediately apparent. They might not be the super shiny and fun stuff, but it's really useful information to both, support and guide our permitting work and managing workload, as well as the permitting life cycle, the process a permit goes through itself. And then one one area which will hopefully be pretty fun is how the landscape changes over time, and because I'm a map nerd, how the landscape changes across space and geographies. So here's just a screenshot of a dashboard in Elements XS, just to show that shows different data about our current permitting workload. So what we're seeing here is currently unassigned permits that came in the last day or two that have not been handed off into a member of our permitting team's queue for review. Also, you see kind of the distribution of permits by the member of staff, kind of what's in their queue to review right now. So this, I think we're starting pretty simple. I think it's a good example at a basic level of data that we didn't really have before, how we're already able to use it to make decisions as simple as, where does this permit, who does this get assigned to based on, what work they currently have on their plate. And of course, we can dive deeper into it. We can drill in, which will kind of be a theme of this update is, being able to get to the deeper level of understanding that helps our decision making. So here on this dashboard, we see distribution of permits, assignments across the team. We also see on kind of the top right in that middle right graph, how many permits that are assigned, what different status they're in, whether they're active, whether they're incomplete, whether they're in an administrative type of review, maybe they're waiting for public input or public comment process, or they're in conditional approval. But really just to highlight here, the takeaway is that actively reviewing a permit means something very different to available capacity than waiting for an applicant to respond with more information, which might be indicated in that incomplete status. So again, we're just diving down to that deeper level to understand how to manage the workload of permit. And that's really kind of the example I'm providing here, is being able to use data to inform our management of the permitting program. So where we can find the capacity to assign a permit, or identifying extra capacity to take on some special projects or studies, or even focused partnership development, things like all of Aaron's work on Lifetime, or even the Minneapolis upzoning study. So that's just insight that we didn't have before, and now it's just at our fingertips. But it's really not just about the workload or how permits are spread across staff. With this new system, we can also pinpoint the when, when is a permit submitted. So here's just a quick dashboard of permits submitted this week versus last week, this month versus last month. And then you can see in those two tables, when permits come in each month and each week over the past year. So you can see fluctuation. And as we continue to collect more data and we build these data sets, we'll be able to better define what is the actual seasonality of our permitting cycles. Before, it just used to kind of be a gut check, or maybe someone did some quick calculations in a spreadsheet at one point, but now we just have live data that we can see where things ebb and flow. And again, that's another data point for management. Maybe we need extra staff in the summer because the workload's really high. That's just more data to help inform our decision making. And then there's just data about the life of a permit itself. So, the whole process from permit submitted to issuance. So here's just another dashboard showing how many permits since February of this year have moved through that process from submittal to issuance. So since February, we see at the top left there, it's 57 permits have moved through the process. And we can see right next to the right there, the average days it takes for a permit to move through that process. So we see 24 days. And because all this data is, it's live, and, this is just a screenshot, but, in the real dashboard, we're able to drill down again and ask more questions of the data. So We can filter all this by, what type of work or, permits that are, pulled for residential single family properties. And we can see how many permits are issued. We can look at minimum, maximum days it takes in terms of how long the process. We see the average there, 18 days from submittal to issuance. And then we can compare that to other things. So just a utility permit. So we're already having, data that we didn't really ever have before, and that we can see that, permits that involve utility work take on average 4 days longer to review and get out the door than, a single family residential home permit. So it's really starting to use the data to gain insights about our process, and that can help us inform or guide changes, tweaks, and adjustments to our process. So, maybe we find that permits of a certain type of work sit at, an incomplete status more than other types of permits. And, we can use that drill down again to look at that and look at those types of permits. And maybe maybe we need some clearer language. Maybe we need to provide some examples. Maybe we just need to just make some small tweaks here or there to help shepherd those permits through the process. And that's really getting to the core of some of this, which is, not only being data driven, but, taking that approach to providing customer service. We don't want to be a pain point for our applications or our permitting process. I don't think we'll ever get to the point where everybody's smiling and high-fiving when they have to come to the district for a permit, but they shouldn't feel like it's pulling teeth. And with data, we can help evolve that process and continually improve it, because that's really going to build our enhance our relationships. It's going to build those partnerships, and that's really going to hopefully be something that promotes some of that early coordination and people wanting to come to the district and partner to make positive change on the landscape. And then at a higher level, this data can help shape policy. Some of this can guide, any tweaks or revisions to the rules. Maybe we find through the data that we're spending too much time, or we're spending a lot of time on residential permits, and then we're looking at that against the environmental impacts of that type of work, and maybe it comes out that it doesn't make sense for us to regulate to that point, or maybe the opposite is true, and really that's just an illustration that bottom line, we are now collecting the data to help inform some of those decisions. So I'm going to adjust my screen real quick and switch over here. You guys saw the screen change a little bit, right? Okay, great. So now here's some of the more exciting stuff. And really what I'm excited about Element Success is, and this new data structure, is our growing ability to be able to track some of those changes on the landscape over time. And because it's so deeply connected to GIS, we can visualize those changes spatially. So here's just a little web map dashboard that I put together showing 2021 permits, well, from April of 2021 to the end of the year. We see we got a breakdown of how many permits by subwatersheds. We can see Lake Minnetonka, there is 213 permits. We have, just an average impervious percent of all the permits, their parcel area. So we can see, whether it's a project area or a parcel, how much of those are impervious. And that's taking data from our new permitting system on, from the submittal, we're seeing, what is the current impervious on a site versus, what is the impervious after the work is done. So we're tracking that data from the new system, and we're able to run, this is just one example of one metric we'd be able to run. So we can even, use some different tools to be able to track additional metrics. We can see total 435 permits, 46 acres of impervious. last year was added to the watershed district through this work that has happened, and as you know, the data we collected passing through our permitting system. And we can even drill down some more. We can filter based on the type. It'll give us the count. It'll adjust 220 single family home permits, or permits that occurred on single family home property. You can see the change in impervious there. And then even, you know, maybe want to see what permits, you know, triggered certain rules. So we can drill down again there. You know, erosion control, we can set that. And we can see all the permits that triggered our erosion control rule last year. And keep going. It's kind of endless. Maybe we want to see what permits also triggered water or shoreline stabilization rule. So we see that 6 permits last year triggered both erosion control and shoreline stabilization, and you know, we can get those metrics. So it's that ability to drill down. And really, you know, what you're seeing is our ability to leverage this permitting data from this new Elements XS system spatially, and that will really be the main gateway that the rest of the organization gets into and accesses and views permitting's data. But it's also true on the flip side, because of that deep GIS connection, we can provide spatial data directly to our permitting team to support their work. So this is just this is the inside of Elements XS that the staff use to review permits. Nobody else in the organization will probably ever really get in here and see it, but you know, we're able to, with just a click of a button, just take whatever permit they're reviewing, be able to launch it into our GIS, which is taking, my Wi-Fi is a little slow right now, but it'll be able to pull up that permit location, and we'll be able to view it in context of other data layers. So, you know, that permit with contours, here we go. I can do some contours here. Maybe, you know, our wetlands. So all that data is really putting it at the fingertips of our permitting staff. They used to have to go to many different sources to find all this information to get that spatial context and what's happening on the landscape. And now it's just, you know, just a couple clicks of the mouse and they're there. And that's really to help, you know, really to provide them the data to make informed decisions on, you know, are things an opportunity, you know, right at the point of entry for an application. I'll switch back here. So now that the permitting Elements XS is implemented, all the pieces are in place, we're collecting all that new data. We want to be able to share that information with the board. So we want to come back maybe early 2023 and provide a presentation, something kind of like, you know, permitting year in review, and walk through a bunch of that information. You know, from some of the basic things that I just showed you, you know, number of permits, number of rule triggers across those permits, time it takes for a permit to move through the process, increase in impervious area, you know, really breaking those down by city, sub-watershed. And then, you know, really zone in into some of that new data we're collecting, some of that rule specific stuff. So we're able to report out, you know, how much floodplain was created, how much floodplain storage was created this last year. What were the permanent wetland impacts? What is the total length of shoreline stabilized, or the total phosphorus and suspended solids that have been removed from waterways due to, you know, BMPs that, you know, come through our permitting process. So hopefully that will answer a lot of questions, but I definitely foresee that, you know, there'll be those drill down questions and want to ask more deeper things to get an understanding, and really understanding that and trying to answer those questions for the board can inform any changes or tweaks we need to make to the Elements XS, the permitting platform, you know, whether that's new data to collect, whether there's some automated analysis we want to run, or if we want to, you know, have some contracted work to by Novotics, who makes Elements XS, to come in and continue enhancing and tweaking the system to make sure some of that data is being collected. So for me, as implementation ends, I'll be transitioning my focus to other IT update needs. You know, we've got a project resource management platforms, as well as asset management and permitting. Will be taking, you know, ownership of this new platform, of course, with support from myself. And, you know, there's always IT help from our managed service provider, and, you know, making sure that we keep maintenance, you know, keep up to date on maintenance so we can get that technical support and the new versions of Elements Access as they roll out. So, you know, my focus then will be in how do we leverage some of this data for use in GIS, which, you know, that'll be how the organization, including the board, probably interacts with the permitting data most of the time. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions. Really excited. It's a good chapter to that's closing, and looking forward to the future with all this new data.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. This is very cool. Do managers have questions or thoughts about this?
I got,
Manager Miller.
first of all, I'm really impressed. It's really phenomenal that you can have all this information at the level in which you're making the decisions for a recommendation. But the thing that occurred to me with this amount of information that would be available, would it lend itself to, you know, right now we got district-wide rules, but these sub-watersheds are so unique in and of themselves that it doesn't seem to me that the rules that would be in the certain water sub-watersheds would be the same as a totally built-out watershed, sub-watershed. And do we ever think about that? You know, I think like in impervious surfaces, you know, in some areas, you know, it isn't going to make any difference. But if it's 95% impervious surface in that sub-watershed district already, you know, should there be other, should we look at the rules a little different in that sub-watershed? So I mean, it's just a general question. I don't know if it makes any sense or not.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I can't speak too specifically about the rules themselves because, you know, I'm the GIS and IT guy, but I can tell you that, you know, the data is there, especially being able to have it so intricately linked with our spatial data. So we can really kind of aggregate at any different geography level to, you know, answer some of those questions that you're asking, get down to that level.
James, this is going to get awfully complicated, the next rule making, but would it make any sense? It seems to me, it seems to me that it would, but I don't know if it's possible.
Well, I think it's an interesting idea, and it is one that's been floated and considered in the past. Lewis might be able to speak to it more than I can. I know former manager Culkins had floated the concept last time we went through rule revisions about some watershed or ecosystem specific regulation, and doing that on an 11 sub-watershed basis wasn't, I think at a political level, just wasn't something that our 29 communities were interested in. You get developers moving across the street and having to have an entirely different set of regulations that they're designing for. So I think across the region, has been a push towards establishing minimum design standards that approach a point of diminishing returns. It's why most of the region uses 1 inch of volume control as the preferred engineering standard. It's not to say, like Alex said, that there aren't huge lessons to be learned about how land use occurs differently across our geographies. And I think that it's in, after a year in review, when we've got all the information in there and we've done some of this data migration, we can look at the historic data that we'll be able to break down, you know, For example, I would guess that 90% of our shoreline works on Lake Minnetonka. And then you're looking at your rules, you're looking at the geographic impact, where the shoreline's being modified, and you could make, some inferences around policy gaps and adjustments to close those gaps. Similarly with volume and, the project that we considered earlier this evening, where are you seeing those types of projects to move volumes around, and what are the impacts? So I wouldn't jump from Alex's map presentation to we need 11 sets of different rules through the next rule revision process. But I think the point is, and I'm glad it landed, that there's going to be so much data to inform us real time on a quarterly basis. We'll start at an annual at the end of this year, but in the future, envisioning on a quarterly basis, a land use change report to the board. This will be the first time that you can really see visually, numerically, what's happening all the time with the changes in land. A lot of the tracking that we're doing has been anecdotal, reading finance and commerce permits that come before the board. You're getting snapshots rather than synthesized, geographically disaggregated data around how developers and landowners are manipulating the watershed. And I think that's really kind of the take-home message and the power in the database that's been pulled together.
Thank you. I feel satisfied. It looks like an absolutely wonderful tool, not only for permit analysis and historic data, but also for the board to have more comprehensive information that's meaningful rather than just data.
Thank you for your questions, Manager Miller. Call on Manager Maxwell, and then after that, it'll be Manager Loftus. Go ahead, Manager Maxwell.
I guess my question just beyond the documentation that we have to have with the permits and if they're passed. But my further question probably on the denial. Say we deny one, how much documentation do we have to have? And do we run it past Mr. Smith to make sure our findings of fact are strong enough to withhold?
Let Lewis tackle that question on how many denials he's seen in his days and how we process those.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if there's any, so.
There certainly have been a few, but it's a small number. And we usually have a good sense. We can see it coming when there's a possibility of a permit denial. So we are very careful to make sure that there are findings in a record to support the board's decision. And we have a very strong record of success on appeal of our permit decisions.
Thanks. That was pretty bad. I just kind of wonder how that process went. If we had always kept the documentation strong enough for it would withstand appeals and everything else.
Thank you, Manager Maxwell. Manager Loftus.
Thank you, President White. It's really fun to see a product and all that information, populating and popping up when you request certain reports. I know we're not at a finished product, but I'm curious if I were looking at this from the perspective of a developer or a permit applicant, instead of internally from the organization, would I, from the public side, be able to see where a permit is in process? I know you said that we can see where it is for staff, but I would say in my experience, at least half the calls into a permitting department are, where are my permit and where is it held up and when is it coming? And, they're status questions really. And so if there's a way for an applicant to know the status, current steps, next steps, where they're at, it's just a great way to streamline that process and give people access to information without having to call and wonder. So curious if that's in the queue or if that's something we might see with the end product. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Manager Loftus. Managers, that is something that's already available. That was, we moved, from a really paper-based or email-based application process into it being all digital. So there is a a portal that applicants go to they create a username and a login, and that's really their entry point, and that's where they input all their information. They identify their address or where the work's going to occur. That's where they start filling out some of the preliminary information that they know about their project. And that's where that's really what they'll come back to once they hit submit. That's where they're able to track where their permit is in the process. And then we do have some automated notifications. So if, let's say, a permit moves from, under review to incomplete because they're missing some information of some sort, that triggers an email that goes out to the applicant. So they're notified of that status change. And then there's also a discussion type system that we're able to note what is missing or what's lacking or any questions that might be there, and then they're able to get notified again through email that they have a message. They go into the portal, they're able to look at basically that discussion. So they're able to track their permit as it moves through the process with status changes, both in the portal, and they do get email notifications as well. So that's really all of that work, which used to, someone would call, someone would write an email. That still kind of happens, but a lot of it happens right within the system and becomes part of the record of the permit itself.
Thank you, Manager Loftus. Anything further from you?
Nope, thank you.
Thank you for the question. Anything else? Manager Heshmati. Manager Heshmati. You are muted. There you
I'm
go.
muted. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you. Okay, I had several questions, and if other people need to stick their hands up, please do so, and I will interrupt and because I have 3 or 4 questions that I wanted to ask.
That's my job. That's my job.
All right. Okay. All right. So please regulate that. Okay. Thank you. The first question is, Alex, are you going to be incorporating data from previous years so we can look back at 2019, 2018, and so on? Is that going to be loaded in also, or help me understand how that's going to work?
Yeah, Manager Heshmati, managers. That was part of the process that just wrapped up within the last couple of weeks, which was a data migration from our old system into the new system. So we do at least have most of the locations for all those old permits, and whatever data was stored in that old system got ported over. So that's probably the last, I want to say 10 years of data is definitely in that old system, but there's a lot of permits that are even older that exist in Laserfish that'll have to be more of a special project to get that data, spatialized or in the system. So we are able to, see like, oh, in 1997, there was a permit at this same site, and we have some information about it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The second question was this, there's a plethora of data here. I mean, there's this huge amount of data here. And who will be, let's see, and this question may go to you too, James. Who will be looking at this data and who will be asking questions of the data? I mean, what are the different departments that are going to be using this? I want to get a sense of how, you gave us examples of how the department would track how, what the workload is and so on. But you also showed us that GIS stuff, which raises lots and lots of interesting, gives lots of data and raises interesting questions. And I was wondering what are the kinds of things that this data can be used for?
Well, I haven't categorized all the, or audited all the possible uses. That's kind of the fun part of new data is asking new questions, and and a lot of times you ask those superficial questions and more come out of it. So, for the rest of the organization, the way, it's envisioned is that GIS will be the gateway to, that permitting data. They won't be going into the Elements XS system most of the time. There might be some cases where there are some staff with access, but that's really where I see my role moving to with this system, is making
Okay.
sure, data gets out in the right places to the rest of the organization and what their needs are, because that's kind of where I see myself fitting in, and that wouldn't be a permitting tech's job to export data, but planning might need this type of data analysis, and that's where I'd be able to plug them or
Okay.
push it to them.
All right. Do we have any kind of a statistical package that goes with this so that we can do, we can do statistical analysis?
Yeah, I mean, it's not part of the platform itself, Manager Hedgemati, but our R&M team does use, I think they use R more than anything for statistics. And because this data is connected to other systems and we'll be able to provide access, we'll definitely be able to pull it into statistical analysis software like R, or even using Python, any automated things. That's kind of the goal, was to make sure it was connected and then it's accessible by other systems.
Okay, so this is a system that's available. Okay.
Mhm, yep.
The final question is, one of the things we had talked about was, and this is a while back, that when applicants come in, that we not only help them with our process, but that we can also give them information about other places that they need to go to, and what kind of information they need to have for those other places. Like they need to go to the city, or they need to go to the county, or they need to go to the Met Council, or things like that. Is that going to be, is that in this, or is that going to be in the future? Help me understand, please. How
Yeah,
that's going.
at a certain level, it is already kind of baked in an automated fashion as part of the application process. So they're entering all their data. We're taking, on the back end, without their knowledge, without their input, we're looking at where their project's happening. We're intersecting with other GIS layers. One of those includes, cities and where we don't have rule authorities. So kind of they come through the process and they see, okay, these rules are triggered. Here are the rules that MCWD regulates. Here are the requirements, or submittal requirements as part of that. And then maybe the city regulates whatever rule here, and that you need to coordinate with the city as well. So part of that is baked into just kind of the application process, at least on a city level, where rule authority is kind of different place to place. But then obviously we're able to start those discussions with the applicant and guide them if they need other permits as well. But where they're needed before they apply to us, that's usually part of the application process. It's like, what's your permit number from the Department of Ag? That's just an example. That might not be right, but so that's part of the data we collect, that permit needs to happen before you can come to us, and that's baked into the process.
And that when we can help them out with that, because I think
Sure.
providing that kind of customer service will go a long way into our not being seen as just the police.
Yes, I agree. And that's also an opportunity for the new website and communicating to people coming to us for a permit through that mechanism too, before they're even ready to apply, but they'll be able to get a sense of what other work they might need to do. So
Right. And I just want to thank the staff, you and the staff, and Bill, your liaison work on this, and having to produce a stunning system. Really, this is really very exciting and stunning. Thank you. It's excellent.
Mr. Whisker.
Just to follow up briefly on Manager Hedgemati's question about the different use cases, and I think Alex mentioned this, but just to kind of reinforce, I think there's sort of three main categories. One is in management at an operational level, and we didn't build the permitting system just to make life easier. But if we've got staff, we want them at their highest and best use. And shuffling papers that require 19 touch points versus using technology is in highest and best use. So there's a category, I think, of management. You know, Kayla coming in now can see how many permits is each individual carrying, what's the average process time, what are the number of touch points based on each type of permit, touch points based on each type of permit per person. So we're starting to be able to see, well, like what's an average carrying capacity, the volume of permits, and how quickly they move per person, which allows us to manage people, but also to manage work. And also when we're thinking about sticking points, like Alex said, if there's a certain type of permit, beyond it just being maybe it's an individual issue, if we're seeing across all staff that certain permits have sticking points or take longer to process, that's encouraging us to go deeper and get them unstuck, which allows us to provide better customer service, be more efficient with the staff time that we have, but also provide better customer outcomes. I think the second category, sort of beyond the management one, is opportunity screening. So as projects come in, we're looking for threat and opportunity, looking for where they're proximal to other public lands, where there's impaired waters nearby, if there's an opportunity for storm sewer diversion, regional treatment, wetland restoration. We have all those data layers that are visual right in front of staff on a particular project. So it's a much more intuitive way to look at the landscape and see if this big project coming in has some meat to work with and if there should be a higher order conversation with the applicant. And then I think the third piece is as we streamline our rules and we use through the rule revision process and focus rules on where we're having the most impact, and we're using technology to reduce friction points. Ideally, staff have more time. And the question is like, how do we want them to use that time? And with this technology, ideally our staff are entering the role of policy planners, where they're using the data to create more foresight and move from operations and just processing permits that are coming at people and moving them through the pipeline and looking out above each permit as a tree, looking out above the forest and understanding how do our policies work? Do they work? So our stormwater management rule, how much load reduction have we accomplished in the last 2 years with the staff time and energy that we're spending? With the number of projects coming through, have we reduced pollutant loading to a certain water body by 100 pounds without making a capital investment? Just by applying our rules? Where are we getting volume control, but volumes are still going up? It's kind of Dick's point is if there's a certain if the policies are set up for greenfield development versus redevelopment, are the redevelopment policies capturing enough volume, or are we still having increased volumes in areas that are flood prone? We're going to be, that's what I'm really excited about, is to look at that data and break it down and uncover how well the policies work so we can take a data-driven approach to the next generation of policy crafting. And that's really where I think the magic lies for staff. So those kind of three broad use cases is management of the work, screening for capital project opportunities, but also looking out over the treetop at all of the data that's coming in and figuring out how well the policies are working, what are the patterns, and where should we be going next?
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, James.
Your hand is up, Manager Hishmati. Were you re-raising your hand or is that just a lingering? Manager Miller, go ahead. You are muted, Manager Miller.
This is the most exciting presentation we've had from the permitting department since we abandoned giving out permits for sand blankets in Lake Minnetonka. Seriously, it is just really good stuff. And Alex, I really appreciated your presentation, making it so simple and so exciting. I'm sure it's been a difficult process, but we're looking forward to your next phase of talent on the internet.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Manager Miller.
Manager Miller.
I do want to, give some big props and kudos to Grace Barlow. I don't think she's on the call, but she was a huge instrumental part of getting this off the ground and making sure it was a success from breaking down all the data we collect through the permitting process and adding all the logic. And she was instrumental in this. So I want to make sure I extend kudos to her.
Thank you for doing that. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Steele? I will offer that I was the liaison to the CAC right after the board meeting in which the board authorized purchase of all the GIS software. And I said to them that there weren't a lot of dollars involved relatively, but it was so important to what we were doing going forward. And so it just feels great to see that coming to fruition, to see the demonstration of how that is in fact going to work for us. It's just really important. I love it. If there's nothing else, we can move on. But thank you very much for that presentation, Mr. Steele. Appreciate it.
Thank you, managers.
Our next item is the administrator's report.
Thank you, President White. Your favorite part of the evening. 2 updates tonight. The board, I think a couple of meetings ago, maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago, had agreed or discussed a comfort level with me working with the MAUD executive director to discuss diplomatic exit strategy from the MAUD summer tour. And I've been informed that after a couple of conversations with the Red River Basin Commission that MAUD summer tour will be moving dates from June, and it will be moving watersheds from our watershed to the Red River Valley in August. And I understand that that's provided an opportunity for MAUD to partner or pair their tour with the Board of Water and Soil Resources summer tour. So it'll be a joint tour that's happening this August up in the Red River Valley. So that's something that we won't be running this year, and really appreciate Emily Javins being creative and working with other partners across the state, as well as Board of Water and Soil Resources, to find something that works for us, but doesn't leave them holding the bag. And it sounds like it's the silver lining is that Bowser is joining the effort there too. And Sherry, you might have more information than me because you sit on the MAUD board, and maybe there's been a conversation about it, but that's the latest that I heard coming out of Tuesday's Red River Basin Commission discussion.
That's all I know too, but next Wednesday I have a board meeting, so we'll see if I learn more.
Okay. And so the final report's just a quick progress report. We really thank the board for all of their hard work on the climate action planning. There's another post-action debrief survey out there for you. I hope you're all happy that we've assigned you a little bit of homework. There's a bunch of statewide or regional climate action frameworks, Hennepin counties, Met councils, state of Minnesota's. We've sort of grouped you into cohorts and asked you to read some of those plans just for situational awareness, so that when we bring the climate action framework forward, you've got some points of comparison. Really, it's low stakes. We're not asking you to go through that cover to cover, but just making sure those resources are out there for you to peruse. We were tracking towards a March 24th deadline for bringing back the text for the climate framework, and then paired with consultant contract for layout and graphic design. I'm recommending to staff that we just hold that back a meeting longer and bring in April, just so that we can give it the work that it needs. And of course, the board had asked that we make sure that engineering and Chris Meehan and Lewis Smith really get a chance to dig in and get their eyes on that. And we just I think we need a little bit more time to draft it, and then make sure Lewis and Chris get ample time to review. So I'm just giving you a progress report that'll be showing up on April 14th instead of March 24th. That's really it for the last 2 weeks.
Nothing about the dam?
Not yet. It's still pretty dry, even though we've had snow. So I think even when we get into the spring, fingers crossed, it's going to be pretty quiet on that front.
I think so too. Well, thank you very much for that report. The meeting is adjourned.
Good evening.
Everybody.
Good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Hey, everybody. Yep.
See ya, Chris.